So fine, let us start with the TestNG framework. Right, over here basically I have broken down TestNG into different sections. Right, the thing is we'll study it end to end. First we will learn how to build test cases with normal TestNG, how to pass, fail and skip the test cases, how to parameterize the test cases, that is if you have to run one test case multiple times with different sets of data, how do you do that? Basically TestNG is all about test case management, nothing else. Okay, and how to execute the test cases parallelly, you can also do that. How can you generate reports with TestNG? Selenium will never tell you all these things. Okay, Selenium will never tell you how to generate reports, how to generate screenshots, all these things, right? And then you have some a few failed test cases. Suppose out of 100 test cases, 20 test cases they get failed. How can you rerun the failed test cases? And this is important, project structure with reports, test cases and test suite. So we will actually build a raw project structure which we will be using later on, and this raw project structure would be having provision for test cases, test suites, reporting and all different things. Okay, so this is what I have actually, you know, I have the plan, that is step 1 is about TestNG. Look, about TestNG, if I tell you, then TestNG is nothing but a unit testing framework. It is not for it is not for the the testers for Selenium specifically. Okay, TestNG is just a unit testing framework which can be used for unit testing. It is not meant for Selenium, but because it has got good features, we use it with Selenium. Okay, so the first thing is that you have to set up TestNG. Okay, and how it helps in the project. It will do everything. It will manage test cases, it will run the test cases parallelly, it will help you read data and all, everything end to end it will help you. Alright, so the first thing is installing TestNG. To install TestNG, it's very simple. You have to go to Google and type TestNG Eclipse. Type TestNG Eclipse, you will get the first website, and you click on install the plugin. Right, now the thing is, they will show the version, they will say that fine, enter update site. Okay, basically you have to go into Eclipse. Just a minute, this thing is, yeah, Eclipse, and then you need to go into help, install new software. Okay, and over here they have given this release link. Okay, but you have to be very careful with this link. You open the link in a new tab. These are the different versions of TestNG. Please install 7.0.0. This is very stable. The versions after this are giving issues. Okay, it really doesn't matter. Everything, all the features which are there in TestNG are present in this version as well. You click on this link and you copy the link over here. Okay, and you go over here and paste the link. Right, you will get TestNG, select this, click on next, next, next. Your Eclipse will restart in this installation. If you get some minor error in between, you can ignore that error. Okay, once your Eclipse is restarted, you can go to Window, Show View and go to Other, and under Java you will have TestNG option present. If this option is present, that means TestNG has been successfully installed on your machine. Fine. So now installed as a plugin inside Eclipse. It gets installed as a plugin. So you can create a new Java project, and I'll call this project as TestNG tutorial. Fine. And over here in this, I'll create a new class or a new package. First of all, package is like a folder inside the source folder, test cases. Now suppose I have a simple test case such as say login test. Very simple test case. Fine. So this is the login test class. In TestNG, there is no main function. There is no main function in TestNG. You have got annotations. Like I have the annotation @test, and then I give the function name public void login test. Fine. If you write like this, then login test becomes a test case. You move the mouse over @test. You add the TestNG library in the project. Okay, TestNG will be added as a library inside your project. Fine. And then you can move the mouse again and import the test annotation. If you expand the TestNG library, you will have the TestNG jar files, nothing else. Okay, TestNG jar files will be there. Alright, now this is the login test. Fine. This function becomes a test case because of this annotation. If I run this test case, to run this test case, you can right click, you can simply say run as TestNG test. So what will happen is that it will run. You see that it says that total test runs are 1, failures are 0, skips are 0. You get this kind of tab as well, results of running the test. So you will get a diagrammatic result, that is over here it says login test green color, that means it has passed. Okay, now inside this you can write your Selenium code. We can actually write the Selenium code over here. If I write over here system.out.println inside login test, fine. So when you run this, it will print inside login test. Okay, and the same thing. Okay, now in TestNG you can have multiple test cases. This is just one single test, right? But like this, we can have multiple tests as well. Fine. Now, how do you create multiple tests? You can create multiple tests in different Java files, or you can create multiple tests in same Java file. Okay, for example, I'll create a new class over here. Fine. I will name that class as, say, send mail test. Okay, and in the send mail test, I'll write @test annotation, public void send email. Fine, and I will import the test annotation. Okay, now to actually implement the send mail, the first thing is you have to log in. So I will actually write over here @test public void login, right, and then @test public void logout. So I have made 3 test cases in this single file. That is possible. Okay, in one Java file you can have different test cases. Okay, and I can print over here logging in, then sending email, then logging out. So I can write something like this. Okay, when I run this file and I see the output, you see that it says logging in, logging out, sending email, but the order is not the same. 3 tests are executed. Okay, if you look at this, then 3 tests are executed, but logout is executed before send email. Alright, don't expect that the test cases will be executing from top to bottom in this particular file. It won't happen like this. You have to prioritize the test cases. Alright, you have to mention over here that this test case has got priority order 1 and the test case over here has the priority order 2 and the test case over here has the priority order 3, 1 being the highest. Okay, 1 will execute first, then 2 and then 3. If you prioritize the test cases, then they will execute in the same order of the priority. You see that? Okay, now in TestNG there are many other features. Okay, like I had opened this small PPT, right? Like we can, just a minute, yeah, like we can use assertions, we can use soft assertion, dependency of the tests and all different things. Fine, let us study about them one by one. Alright, now assertions. Assertions are used for validations. Till now we have just seen that how you can pass or how you can run TestNG and build test cases, prioritize them. But how to do validations in the test case? For example, this was my login test. Whenever we do testing, okay, we have some actual data which has to be compared with expected data. Fine. The actual data will be retrieved from the application. For example, if you have text on the application, then you will write driver.findelement.getText command and get the text. The expected data can be present in some external file like a properties file or Excel file, and we have to compare both of them, right? And based on that we pass or fail the test. So to do that we have the class known as assert in TestNG. Okay, and you can write assert equals function. Assert is a class and assert equals is a static function inside that particular class. Okay, that's why you can call it directly with the class name, and you can send some actual and expected data inside assert equals function. The actual data say is XYZ and the expected, which will be later on read from external file or something, is also XYZ. So this assertion will pass. If I run the test, it will pass the test case. However, if I give both of them as something different and I run this, so this is going to fail. You can see the assertion error is thrown. Expected was XYZA, but actual is XYZ. And you will see that in the stack trace, you will see the line number as well, that is on the line number 15 in login test. You click on that, the line will be highlighted. That on this particular line, the exception is thrown. So this will be used a lot during the frameworks and all which we are going to study. Okay, assertions, assert equals. Fine. Now in the diagrammatic form also you will see it's failed. Now TestNG also builds some HTML reports by itself. If you right click on the project and refresh the project, you will see the test output folder. Fine. If you go to the properties of this test output folder, open this and you open index.html. Okay, This is the HTML report for the login test. It is not a very user friendly report. It is not a report which can be given to the client and all. Okay, that is not possible. Alright, so you don't use this report. We use better reports known as extent reports. I will also talk about extent reports in coming days. Right. So when we are over here in step 3, I'll be talking about extent reports. We are in the step 1 of TestNG right now. Okay. Now there is one more type of assertion. If I write assert dot assert true, fine. And you know what is this assert true? Over here you can give some condition and some message. Like I gave a condition like 5 greater than 2. The condition will evaluate to true, and in the message you can give some error message. If the condition evaluates to false, then this assertion will fail, and in the reports you will see some error message coming up. If I run this, this is going to pass, nothing is going to happen, because this condition was evaluating to true. However, if I write 5 greater than 12, okay, and I run this code, so you will see that it fails. Okay, and it will give some error message as well out here. Okay, right. Now, if you think that how will this assertion be used, where and when will I be using this assertion? Okay, now in Selenium we will have functions. For example, we will have a function like is element present. Right, you can send the XPath of the element inside the function, and this function will decide and tell you that whether the element is present on the web page or not. If it is not present, then this is going to throw some error message. Okay, that is element present will throw some error message. Okay, so if this function returns you false, then some error message will obviously be thrown. I hope you got my point. Fine. Now, if you talk about assertions, if I write over here A, and if I write over here B, okay, and if I run the code, see A is printed. After that you get the assertion failure, that is assertion did not work, and after that you actually, what happened was, you actually don't see B being printed. This is not being printed. Okay, this is not being printed. So A is printed, but B is not printed. Fine. So what is happening? The point is the line on which the assertion fails, the control stops on that line. The test case stops. Now sometimes you don't want this to happen. Okay, you have a test case and you don't have a critical error, might be there is some spelling mistake or something. You don't want the tests to just stop because of assertion failure. Alright, So in that situation, you have got workarounds, you have got soft assertions. Fine. For example, I'll just make a new class over here known as uh, say registration test. I couldn't get you. In that case, it will not report a failure. Again, look, first of all, when assertion is error is thrown, okay, you're saying that you can surround it with try catch block. If I surround it with try catch block, first of all, assertion, when it fails, exception is not thrown. Assertion error is thrown. You don't get any exception. Even if I catch this error, okay, and if I run the code, I'll print error. You see, it passes the test case. Okay, because actually you caught the exception and you were not managing it. Okay, so this is the thing. Just a minute. Alright, now you don't prefer to do that, but we have got soft assertions. Alright, if I write at the rate test public void registration test, there is a class known as soft assert. You create the object of this soft assert class, and then you write over here soft assert dot assert equals, you compare A with A. So this will actually not fail. Then you write compare A with B. So this line will fail. But you don't want control to stop over here. Okay. And you can write assert A with C. This will also fail. You can write soft assert dot assert true. Some condition 5 greater than 4 with some error message. Okay, fine. Now this would be like this. So this will not fail. But if I write 5 greater than 14, so this line will also fail. So with soft assert you can report multiple failures as well. Okay, but the thing is the control will not stop in between, and in the end it is mandatory to write this particular line soft assert dot assert all. If you don't write this line, then the failures will not be reported. Okay, so when you run this code, you will see that it will print in the output. You see it reported 3 failures. Expected B but was A, expected C, found A, error message. Okay, so this error message text is coming up from this particular text. So soft assertions will be used a lot. Okay, this kind of assertion, hard assertion, the only problem is it just fails the test case and stops the program. Alright, so TestNG has lot of features. You must be just understanding now what I was telling. Okay, you can also introduce dependency between the test cases. Okay, generally sometimes the test cases are dependent on each other. So you can introduce dependency between the tests as well. For example, in send mail test, I am logging in, I am sending mail, and I am logging out. If I am logging in and I am failing, suppose I write over here assert dot fail command. Now assert dot fail will directly fail the test case. Okay, sometimes we also use this command where we are very sure that the test has failed. For example, you get a 404 error and you are very sure that fine, it's a 404 page not found error. So you have to fail the test case. So you can simply write assert dot fail got 404 error. So the test will fail login test, and in the error message you will see this thing coming up. Okay, if I run this, you will see assertion error got 404. So the login test is failing. But the problem is send email and logout got executed. Okay, so this thing cannot be accepted, because if one test is failing, then the other two tests should be skipping at least. They should not be executing. So you can write over here, you can introduce dependencies, you can write depends on methods, and you can give the method as login. And similarly, when you call the logout test, you can write over here depends on methods login and send email. So your logout test is dependent on both of these, and your send mail test is dependent on the login test. Okay, now yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we can do it in XML file. Yes, we can do it in XML file. That XML file is known as testng.xml. Okay, so you can do that. I'm going to cover it in some time, like batch running of tests and all. Okay, over here. Okay, so you have, yeah, you can do everything in that. So over here, generally the tests which are dependent, you should not have dependent test cases. First of all, this is unwritten rule of automation that you should club them together or something. Okay, if even if you have, then you can put them in one file, you can prioritize them, and you can introduce dependency like this. Because dependency of test cases creates a problem in parallel running when we have Selenium grid. If Selenium grid is there and multiple tests are running parallelly, then dependency between the tests is there. It becomes tough over there. Okay, so out here when you run this code, you will see in the output yellow means skipping. So send mail and logout test both have been skipped. Okay, because the login test, it had failed. But what you can do is, just a minute. Suppose if I write over here throw new skip exception. Skip exception, if I deliberately throw new, this is the keyword, to deliberately throw one exception. Skip exception is an exception inside TestNG which will skip the test case. Okay, so you can write over here with the message that skipping test. So if I skip the login test over here, if I run the code, you will see that login test is skipped. The other two aren't there over here right now. They aren't. The other two aren't even showing up over here right now because it is simply skipped. The other two were dependent on this one. Okay, so this is how TestNG works majorly. Okay, now there are other annotations as well in TestNG. For example, under TestNG test cases package, you can right click, you can go to new and click on other. And under TestNG, you will see TestNG class. You click on next and you will see that these all are the annotations in TestNG. Apart from the TestNG test annotations, there are many other test annotations as well. Okay, I will name it as say new test only. Fine. And I will make a test case like this under it. Just a minute. I'll write new test A and suppose new test B. Just giving you a dummy example. And I'll print over here test A and I'll print over here test B. Okay, now there are predefined annotations in TestNG. Like I have the annotation at the rate before test annotation. Okay, I can make a function like this, public void before. Okay, and inside it I can simply print before test. And then I can make an annotation at the rate after test, public void after, and inside this I can print after test. Okay, right. So when you run this code, you will see that the before test and after test annotations, they get executed before and after executing all the test cases. Okay, so if you have to say open a browser, so you can open the browser in before test, execute both the tests on the same browser, and after test you can close the browser. Fine. If a test case fails, suppose new test is failing. Okay, new test B is failing. I write over here assert dot fail with some error message. And if I run the code, then in the output it is failing B test, and in the console you will see that before and after test are surely executed. Okay, it doesn't matter whether the test case fails, passes, no. These annotations will surely be executed. The order also doesn't matter. I can keep this after test annotation anywhere. But there is a predefined order in which these annotations will be executed. Okay, so you don't have any control over this. There is a predefined order for these annotations. You also have at the rate before method annotation, this one. Okay, and you can write, if you write just at the rate before and hit control space bar, you will get the annotations. Okay, so you have the before method annotation, and I can write public void in it, and system.out.println before method, and similarly you have the after method annotation. The after method annotation will be executed after every method, and before method will be executed before every method. If I run this code, you see that before method, after method is executed before and after test A, then before method and after method is executed before and after test B. Before test and after test are just executed once. So before method and after method would be executed for every test. Every test, for example, you have to, for every test you have to build a separate report. So in the before method you can initialize the reports, and in after method you can finalize the reports of that particular test. I'm just giving you an example that you can also work out this way. Alright, now what happens sometimes is that output of one test becomes input of another test. Alright, for example, the new test A, yeah, no, you just have to write it once. You just have to write this once, and for every test over here it will be called again and again. These are two tests, right? I just wrote it once, and okay. Now, as I was telling you, sometimes output of one test is the input of another test case. Okay, for example, if this test generates a booking ID, now this test case over here requires this booking ID. You have to basically send a variable from one test to another test. Okay, so there is something known as test context. There is a context, we can call it a session. Okay, simple. It's like a test session which is available, in which you can store variables and you can pass over into different tests in the same file. So there is an interface known as iTest context. You can send the reference of this interface inside every test. This is the internal interface inside TestNG. If I write over here context dot, there is a function known as set attribute. You can set an attribute, for example, I can set an attribute like say booking ID to the value which is generated by the Selenium script, so to some number. And you can retrieve the booking ID from the same context object reference will be passed over into this test. Into the test, the same context object reference will be passed. You can write over here context dot get attribute booking ID. Alright, so when you run the test, you will see that when the test B runs, it prints the booking ID. That is why TestNG is used, because it gives us so many features. Okay, it gives us so many features, pre-built features, which we can use very easily along with Selenium. And TestNG, as I was telling you, it is not just meant for Selenium, it's just a normal unit testing framework. But because it has got such good features, we use it along with Selenium. Alright, now once this is done, I'll just tell you one more thing, that is how to parameterize the test cases. Okay, that is, uh, how to use data provider annotation. Fine. Say for example, I will create a new class known as, or let me take the login test class only. Okay, suppose I have to execute this login test multiple times with different sets of data. Okay, then how do you do that? Alright, I'll just, that is a framework, data driven, that is a completely different thing, right? You have to use an annotation for that, known as a data provider. Okay, look, generally what we do is we data driven framework is like, you are having say 20 test cases and you want to completely manage them end to end, then we go for a data driven framework. In that case, framework means a project. Okay, it's a complete end to end project. That's what a framework means. Fine, just a minute. This thing, let me open this utility. Okay, now out here what we are going to do is that we are going to use the two-dimensional array. We store the data in the two-dimensional array. Two-dimensional array will have some rows okay and will have some columns. The number of rows will be equal to the number of times you want to run the test. Okay, if I want to run the test 5 times, then I'll have 5 rows. And number of columns will be equal to number of parameters in the test case. Basically, the first row will hold the data for the first iteration of the test. The second row will hold the data for the second iteration. As most of you must be knowing, this index is known as 0, 0. This index is called as 0, 1 because this is the 0th row. This becomes 1, 0. Okay, something like this. So what we do is that in this data provider annotation, we return a two-dimensional object array. Okay, so this object array, two-dimensional object array, you have to create with certain number of rows. Say I will write 3 rows and 2 columns. So there are 3 rows in this and there are 2 columns in this. 2 columns, why 2 columns? Because I have got 2 parameters for login test, username and password. The number of columns should be equal to number of parameters in the test case. And number of rows should be equal to number of times you want to run the test case. So basically I want to run it 3 times with different user IDs, passwords. So I will actually put the data in row 1 over here. I will write data array 0. 0 equals to say some username and 0, 1 is some password. Similarly, you can fill up the data in the row number 2. You can write 1, 0, 1, 1, U2, P2. And similarly, in row number 3, you have 3 rows. Okay, and then you can return the data array. So once you return the data array, you write over here, what TestNG does is that it will understand that you have to run this login test 3 times. But this is the first step. There are more steps which you have to do. The second step is that you have to link this test case with this data provider. You have to tell TestNG that fine, for this test case, the data provider is coming from this function. The data is coming from this function. Okay, you have to write over here that the data provider is equal to get data. Alright, and the third step is number of columns. You have 3 columns, sorry, number of columns. Number of columns are 2. If you have 2 columns, then you have to pass over 2 input parameters. Over here we have got username and password. This is the most important thing. The number of input parameters in the function should be equal to number of columns. Basically number of parameters in the test case, because number of columns, they represent number of parameters. Okay, every row has got 2 parameters. So you should have 2 parameters in the test as well. So now automatically TestNG will understand that fine, I have to get the data from this get data provider, and what it will do is that it will send this set of data inside this function first, then it will send this set of data, and then the third set of data. It will run the test 3 times. Okay, if I just comment this and I just print username followed by the password. Alright, and if you run this code, you see that it's printing 3 times. The test is executed 3 times with different sets of data. If it fails with one set of data, it starts again with the next set of data. Okay, it's not that if it fails with U1, P1, it will just stop. It will start off with the next test data. Alright, now the thing is, generally we don't have data providers for every test case mentioned like this. Okay, generally test cases in one test suite have a single data provider, because you don't hard code the data like this. We will read the data in this 2-dimensional object array from an Excel file or a JSON file, or from some external file. We will not hard code the data over here. Right. What we do is that we make a new class practically when we work, and I will call it as data providers. I'll name this class data providers. So you make multiple data providers over here. Right. For example, at the rate data provider, and I will name it, I'll call it, name is say test suite A provider, something like this. Okay, and I will make it static. It will return a 2-dimensional object array, and we make the 2-dimensional object array inside it. Alright, fine. And in the test case, so we have the data provider in a different class right now. Alright, when we are in the test case, we write at the rate test data provider class. What is the class of data provider? Okay, I will mention that this is the class. Fine. And the data provider is test suite data provider. I have given this name, so I'll give it over here, right? And this class, you know, this thing over here, just a minute, I gave it wrongly. You have to write data providers dot class. So this is the data provider class, and this is the data provider in that particular class from which the data has to become has to actually come to this particular test. All right, what is the advantage of this? I'm just going to tell you in some time. If I run this, then again output will be the same. All right, the advantage which I will get is that for every test suite, or for few groups of test cases, maybe you can have different data providers, right? It can be like test suite B data provider is this, get data B I can call it. All right, so for multiple test cases I can have a single data provider. All right, now if two test cases have the same data provider, then both of them they want different data. Okay, in my case I just have the login test mentioning that this is my data provider. Okay, but if tomorrow there is one more test case which says that this is also my data provider, multiple test cases can point to a single data provider, then this data provider should return you the data corresponding to that particular test. Okay, in the data provider we can have the method entry. You can TestNG provides you with this feature. It sends the reference of the method class, and if I print the method over here, m dot get name, okay, and if I run the login test, you will see that it prints method as login test. Whatever is the name of the test case, the test method, all right, this data provider is able to retrieve that name with the help of the method reference. So you can decide over here that if in case the method name is equal to login test, in that case, you know, you form the two-dimensional data array. You can declare the two-dimensional data array as null over here. All right. So if the name is login test, then this is the data. You fill the data array. You can write else if the name is some other test. Then you can initialize your data array according to that test case. Initialization basically means that tomorrow we are going to read the data from the Excel for that particular test. So correspondingly you can do that. Okay, so you don't have to make a data provider inside every test case in case you want to read the data for that particular test. Corresponding to the test in the same file you are making a data provider, you don't have to do that. You can centralize your data provider at a single place, fine, and every test when it calls it, it will send the test name into it, and corresponding to the test name you will prepare the data and send it back. I'll stop here for today. I think it's become very hectic. Okay, that's too much, I know that. Alright, so I'll post the video as well. Anybody with any questions? Yeah, I will do that. Make it yourself, code it yourself. Once you write the code yourself, you will come to know. Okay, overall what I did, I'll give you overall picture. I made a test case and I made a data provider for it and sent the data inside the test. Then I moved this data provider to a different file, and from that different file I send the data inside the test. So the same thing you have to do it. Once you write the code yourself, right, you will get the confidence.